Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, Southern Appalachian Herbs at blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to discuss a lot of herbs, and it's a pretty special show because I've got an interview with Amy Anthony about aromatherapy. Now, aromatherapy is a lot more than meets the eye. I know it's kind of trendy right now. A lot of people are getting into aromatherapy. It is a branch of herbal medicine, and it's very potent. It's not just, pleasant scents. It actually does have quite a bit of effect. And we had a fascinating conversation. We discussed several herbs. We discussed the techniques of how aromatherapy essential oils are made. We discussed how they work in the body, how they work with the physiology of the body, with the sinuses, with the nervous system, especially. She's very focused on how the essential oils affect the nervous system. And she's doing some very interesting experimentation with some of our native herbs. And when the herbs are used in the way she uses them, they have a very different effect than how I would use them as a essentially a folk herbalist. I prefer to use teas and tinctures. So you're going to find this interview really fascinating. She's the head of several guilds and associations. She's one of the very top people in the field. So we will get into that in just a few minutes. But as promised, I am going to give you a little taste of my new cookbook, Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. It is oyster season in North Carolina. We have a late season. It's not for any particular reason that anyone can figure out. Uh, basically, oysters, they always say, are good any month that has an R in it. And really, that's a sort of a false concept. Obviously, when the weather is cool, oysters store better, they keep better, they transport better, they last a little longer. When the weather's cool, I think they have a better flavor and texture. But you can get farm raised oysters year round now, and the quality is actually very good in most cases. If you get domestic farm raised oysters, you're going to have very good quality. The oysters coming out of Asia, I have my I have my qualms. There have been so many recalls where the oyster farms were contaminated with sewage, and they just didn't bother to tell us for a while, so till they had been on the shelves long enough to make Americans sick. So whenever possible, I try to avoid canned oysters. I try to avoid store-bought oysters unless they say they're from our local waters. And I would say that's, really anywhere from, for me, I'm going to say Maryland down to Georgia, yeah, and the Gulf. Yeah, I'll eat oysters from the Gulf Coast. And, dude, I'd eat them from the West Coast if I can get them good and fresh and up in, Maine and whatever. I love oysters. But really, a lot of what's on the market is coming in from Asia. Indonesia is a big farmer. China is a very big oyster producer. And I have serious concerns about the quality. And unfortunately, if you go to a restaurant, I'm going to say 99% of the time, unless it's specified otherwise, those oysters are coming from Cisco or US Foods or another big food service company. And yeah, I don't trust them. I don't trust them at all. Seriously. And really, even in a rural town in North Carolina, where we have a major fishing industry, that's been part of our culture and our economy for centuries. Uh, you can sit down in a restaurant right on the beach, right on in one of the historic fishing villages like Calabash, North Carolina, famously, or up around the Outer Banks. And the seafood you're eating is probably not coming from local fishermen or local waters. It's probably coming from Asia. And it costs a lot. It costs a lot. I mean, for a plate of seafood, like say, your typical North Carolina Calabash style seafood platter, which is going to be fried flounder, fried shrimp, everything's fried, of course, fried oysters, maybe a deviled crab, maybe some scallops, right? Um, some French fries and hush puppies. You're looking at probably 25 to $30 a plate. I mean, it's not an inexpensive meal by any means. Well, our season opens around the last day of October, last day of November. Now, South Carolina season opens two to sometimes 3 weeks earlier. Nobody knows why. That's just the way it is. So, in order for me to have my beloved fresh oysters, I have to buy oysters or go harvest them myself. I actually really prefer to get out in the bays and the mud flats and uh, the creeks, tidal creeks and such, and harvest my own oysters. I mean, that's really my favorite thing to do. My grandfather taught me to do that when I was very young. I like to just wade out there in the water, be about ankle deep in the muck and the mud at low tide with the horrible smell of low tide, and start picking off nice big oysters from the colonies of oysters. It's how they grow. It's almost in, well, they call them colonies. You can think of them as like oyster condominiums or apartment buildings or something. The shells build one on top of another until they start growing up out of the water. And those are called subtidal oysters. Those are really my preference. And I take, a knife with me and I'll stand out there in the water and on well, fairly pleasant day like today. I mean, it's really warm for October. I mean, November. It's really warm for November. But even in really cold, nasty weather, I'll stand out there and just eat raw oysters until I can barely walk out of there. I eat so many. I just love oysters. Well, here's the tip how to buy oysters if you can't harvest them yourself. First of all, you want to make sure they're coming from clean water as best you can. Secondly, you want to make sure there hasn't been a big storm a few days earlier that would wash a lot of, contaminants, fertilizer, storm drain runoff, even sewage, into the water. Um, Usually, your state will do a pretty good job of closing shellfish beds when they've been contaminated, but always double check. And I don't trust the state government very much whatsoever. But when you buy your oysters, you want to make sure they were harvested within the last. I wouldn't buy them if they had been out of the water more than 3 days, honestly. Um, they need to be covered in mud. When you go to like what I would consider a more upscale uh, market or grocery store, usually the oysters are clean and they're pristine and they're sitting on a bed of ice. They look great, and if they came farmed, they may be perfectly good. But for wild oysters, I want them covered in mud because the mud actually helps keep them fresh. I usually will buy or harvest a bushel or two of oysters at a time. And I eat, like I said, plenty of them raw. I eat them roasted. I eat them fried, whatever. But I want to have enough in the freezer that I can have oysters year round. So this is my first little trick. Okay, first of all, get your oysters. Keep them as cold as you can. Don't freeze them, but keep them nice and cool. Bring them back, and when you're ready to prepare them, then wash them, scrub them down. I like to use a bristle brush so I can really get in all the cracks and crevices. The reason for that, the reason for that is as valuable as the oyster itself is, the oyster liquor or the juice that comes out of that shell is just as essential. Never waste a drop of it if you can. In order to keep oysters around year round, what I do is I scrub up a whole bunch of them. I fill a couple of, usually I'll use the bottom pan from a broiler pan or a similar like roasting pan, but basically I want to use something that I don't really mind if it gets all scratched up. It's just a pan I don't care about, basically. I layer them in there and I put the curved side of the oyster down. Oysters always have, at least in our area, they have a flat side and a concave side. The deeper part of the shell is curved, and when the oyster roasts and opens, most of the oyster liquor will stay in that curved part of the shell if you set that part down. That's also the part you want to put down if you're grilling or smoking oysters, which we'll get into in just a minute. So what I do is I put them on a tray. I heat the oven up to about 400, and I pop them in the oven for up to 15 minutes. I'm looking at somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes, and what I'm looking for is just when the oysters open. If you go to a restaurant on the Carolina coast, North Carolina, South Carolina, pretty much the same in this regard, when they have oyster roasts, they will ask, do you want them, your oysters wet? And what that means is just barely roasted, just barely cooked where they open. That's the way I like them. That's actually how I like to order them. You can get them, a little bit more cooked than that, or you can get them really well cooked. And if you're going to do that, don't even bother because, the best oysters are the least cooked oysters, essentially. So I put them all on this tray, and I really fill the tray. I mean, it's not just one layer. I usually have two or three. Roast them for up to 15 minutes at 400. Take them out and let them cool for a few minutes till I can handle them. Then I like to use a towel. You can get special gloves for this, but I just use an old hand towel and hold on to the oyster with one hand and pop the shell open with an oyster knife. I think an oyster knife really is the best tool for the job. They're not expensive. You can get an oyster knife from most anywhere you would buy cutlery or silverware or any kitchen goods for maybe $5. It efficiently pries open the oyster. It's also very good for clams. Uh, and it does so, it has a guard that'll help keep you from cutting your hand. The tip of that shell of the oyster is actually very sharp. If you slip, you're far more likely to cut yourself with a shell than you are with the knife. I have used various tools from pocket knives to screwdrivers and usually have gotten cut. This last week, I went and got about a half bushel of oysters, around 200 oysters. Really, it's a lot of oysters for the money. I think this year, um, if I remember correctly, because of gas prices and just general inflation, oysters are more expensive than usual. I think a bushel's going for around $75 or so. That's it. That's retail price. That's market price. Now, if you were at the docks, if you were down at a local fish market when the fishermen were bringing their catch, you'd probably pay less. But if you're inland, and I was this past week, um, but I know a very good store. Let me tell y'all, if you're ever in North Carolina, if you're ever in the middle of North Carolina, let's say east of the middle, okay? This is a town called Rayford. Rayford is just a little town, I guess a little southeast of Fayetteville. It's um, it's a very rural town, and they have a real uh, grocery store, old-fashioned grocery store attached to a hardware store and feed and grain store. The same family owns both of them. They actually have pet chickens that wander around in there. The guy that owns it, well, couple, he and his wife, I think he inherited it. They do a fantastic job. They buy produce from local farmers. He goes to the coast, to the seafood markets, and brings in fresh fish. And I mean, I'm talking sea trout and grouper and spots and flounder and croaker and all the great fish, plus your catfish and your bass and all that. He had some beautiful sea bass in there the other day, by the way. Um, they have fresh oysters. And when I go to get the oysters, I call in the morning. It says, yeah, they'll be here at this time. They have literally been harvested either that morning or the afternoon before. They're brought in big burlap sacks covered in mud. They're perfect. He's a butcher. He does his own meats. He makes sausage in-house. Really like this place. I guess Rayford is probably, I'm going to say, I would say it's a majority, Black African American town. It may be about half and half black to white, and a lot of Lumbee Indians, a lot of Mexican folks too. But they're country people, and they know quality, and they don't spend a fortune. The store doesn't charge a fortune. You're going to get good quality there. You're going to get excellent service. And they get all like our speckled butter beans and Dixie Lee peas and fresh peanuts for boiling that I just can't find anywhere else, basically. And it's in Rayford, and it's called Home Food. They also have a little cafe. They take that same quality produce and meats and they cook lunch for people. Great place. Little town, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And if you ever stumble through there, be sure to stop at Home Foods and tell them I said hi. So anyway, I went and got about a half bushel of oysters. Got a good price, perfectly fresh. Guy carried them out to the vehicle for me. My ankle is still an issue. I had to actually kind of jog across the road because of oncoming traffic, and I thought my ankle was just going to collapse and I was going to fall in the middle of the street. It's still broken. I can't get around that. But anyway, I got back and I scrubbed up those oysters, got them nice and clean, and I shucked about 200 oysters and didn't cut myself the first time because I used a towel and I used an oyster knife. It's really that easy. It just takes a little practice, a little getting the hang of it. So anyway, after I've roasted my oysters just long enough for them to open, I shuck the oysters, which means opening the shell and taking the oyster out, and save every bit of that liquid. Once I've done that, I put the oysters in a container and pour the oyster liquor over them. They will keep in the refrigerator like that for weeks. They can be frozen like that, and they will keep for months. That's the secret to have fresh oysters all year long. Just you cook them through just enough for them to open and store them in that oyster liquor and freeze them quickly. And you're not going to have, you should not have a problem. I mean, always be careful with seafood. But what do you do with oysters? Well, like I said, I love them roasted. I love to just put a little lemon juice on there, maybe a little hot sauce. I like to use Texas Pete. Texas Pete is the North Carolina hot sauce. I think the same company now owns Sriracha, and but Texas Pete is our cayenne and vinegar based hot sauce. I think it's very good. Fried is absolutely delicious. Just toss them in a little flour or cornmeal and deep fry them. Just put them in oil and fry them till they're nice and crispy brown. If I'm having fried oysters, I like to make a homemade cocktail sauce. The way I do that is I use ketchup. When I can, I use my homemade fermented ketchup. You will find that recipe in the book. It's absolutely delicious and much better for you and has a lot less sugar than store-bought ketchup. But yeah, I'll use store-bought ketchup, no problem. Um, Combine that with horseradish, and again, I make a fermented prepared horseradish, or I make a fermented horseradish, which is just ground and fermented, or you can get prepared horseradish. Get a nice hot horseradish that's mixed with a little mayonnaise and vinegar. That's what prepared means, by the way. So mix in ketchup and horseradish, a couple of dashes of Worcestershire sauce, and a few dashes of hot sauce, salt and pepper, and the juice of one lemon, and you've got a fantastic cocktail sauce that is nowhere near as sweet as what is served in most restaurants and has a lot of spiciness and sourness and tang, and I think it's perfect for any kind of fried seafood. I dip my fried oysters in there, I dip my fried shrimp in there, just really good. Beyond that, there's so many things you can do with oysters. Uh, the other, well, last week we talked about how to make a roux for gravy. Well, you can also make a chowder the same way. Make your roux with flour and butter, stir in milk, and I mean, in its most essential form, you would just pour in some oysters with their liquor. But I like to go a little further than that. First of all, I like to sweat down some onions because I like some onions. And before I do that, I like to fry some bacon because I like some bacon in there. So fry some bacon, chop it up, sweat your onions down in the bacon grease, make your roux in the same pan, pour in your milk, put in your oysters, bring to a simmer, and eat. Really, you want to add the oysters when the liquid is already simmering and only cook them about 5 minutes. You don't want to overcook your oysters. They actually have a little edge, a little like we call it like a ruffle. And when the oyster is cooked, it will go from smooth to kind of rippled. When that little lip or whatever of the oyster is ruffled looking, when it's wavy, the oyster's done. You're good to go. Absolutely delicious. Very inexpensive meal. Another really good way to do it is for dressing. You can make like a We'll get into dressings as we get closer to Thanksgiving, but just remember this is an option. Oyster dressing can be used just the same way you would use chicken or turkey in a turkey dressing or sausage in a sausage dressing. Really delicious. If you want to get really fancy, you can go back to uh, George Washington's wife's Martha's pot roast recipe, essentially her roast beef recipe. She would take a nice round of beef, like top round, and take a knife and put holes in it. And in each of those holes, put an oyster wrapped in bacon. Or she would alternate oyster in one hole and bacon in another hole. That is really nice. You put that in a pot roast, like a Dutch oven, or you can do it like roast beef in the oven. Baste it with the juices. I definitely think some onions have to go with it. A few herbs, a little parsley, a little thyme. Thyme is really good. But tomorrow, I'm going to be smoking a turkey. Now, had I not already shucked these oysters and put them away, I would make a nice lunch of smoked oysters. This is how easy it is. Okay, so a turkey's going to go on a smoker on over hardwood coals. I use open hickory. The live coals. I'm not using charcoal briquettes. I'm not using gas. I'm not doing any of the fake stuff. I'm not making a roast turkey. I'm making a barbecued turkey. So take the turkey and rub it down with some oil and salt and pepper, and same way you would do it if you're going to put it in the oven. Except I put it on a barbecue pit to smoke it slowly, directly over the coals for about 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours. Keep it at a low temperature. We're not going over 250, so it's going to cook for a while. Really better if you brine your turkey overnight, or if you're shopping in a store, you can get a pre-brined, but I really prefer an unbrined turkey and to brine it myself. Maybe we'll talk about that next week as we get a little closer to Thanksgiving. But for the sake of discussion right now, let's say I'm going to have to be sitting beside a barbecue pit for 8 to 10 hours, monitoring the temperature, adding wood and such to it, and keeping the smoke billowing. It's a long time to sit beside a pit. Usually we'll make some kind of snack. I may smoke a chicken at the same time. Chicken's done in just a few hours, really 2 hours, but you can go to five, just depending on your recipe. Or take some jalapenos, yeah, or poblano peppers. This is really good. Stuff them with cheese, wrap them in bacon, put them on there, let them cook. That's really delicious. But one of the easiest things to do is oysters. You shuck your oyster raw, okay? Take the flat shell off, put the curved side down on the grill grate of your smoker, and just let them smoke for about an hour. As they're cooking, add a little salt and a little bit of oil. The oil will absorb more of the smoke flavor and it'll keep the oyster from drying out as they cook. In about an hour's time, and really it depends on the heat, really of your barbecue, they'll be done. And smoked oysters are fantastic. That is one of my favorite things to eat. I think I could live off of smoked oysters and blue cheese if I had choose only two foods. Give me an onion, some smoked oysters, and blue cheese, and I'd be happy. Take the oysters when they're ready, take them off, put a little hot sauce on there, grab you some saltine crackers or something, and go to town. I mean, it's good stuff. And as the old timers used to say, if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'll be smoking a turkey tomorrow. And I'll probably be eating my oysters fried since they're already shucked. Or maybe I'll just eat them as is. I haven't decided yet. Maybe have a few shrimp too. That would be good. All right, so now that I'm getting hungry, it's time for us to go ahead and get into this interview. Talk about herbs and talk about aromatherapy. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. But anyway, y'all, remember all my books are available at Amazon.com, or you can get a PDF directly from me by going to my blog or my Substack. And I hope you will. The cookbook has been so well received. I mean, I get good reviews on my herb books, but cookbook hits such a larger audience that I'm getting so many people giving me feedback and telling me how much they enjoy it and how much they've learned from it, and really just like I said, how much they enjoy it, just enjoy reading it. I wrote it in a very conversational style, just the same way I'm talking to you right now. And so, yeah, people are really. I tell you what, go to Amazon right now. Go to the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking for homesteaders, preppers, permaculture people, and everybody else. by Judson Carroll, of course, and read a review somebody left me about 2 weeks ago. It's a fantastic review. It's one of the nicest reviews anyone's ever written for one of my books. I wish I knew who it was. I'd like to thank the lady, I think it is, personally. There's a really excellent review also on 5acresinadream.com. The, but 5 Acres in a Dream, excellent website, highly recommend it. And that is the number five, ACRESANDADREAM.com. So great reviews if you want to check it out. I'd love if you'd buy the book. I think you'll really find it useful for cooking your Thanksgiving meal. But so without further ado, let's get into this interview. As I said, it's a really good one, and I've got some great interviews coming up. This one's just really interesting. So here we go. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Amy Anthony. She is an aromatherapist and if not the leading one in the field, certainly in the absolute top tier. And today she's going to tell you all about aromatherapy. I know you're going to find it an absolutely fascinating topic. She also has her own podcast, and I hope she will give you the URL and the name for that, and all her many works, because she is, like I said, very prominent in the field, head of uh, one of the leading associations, certainly. And let's just jump right in. So, Amy, please tell me a little bit about yourself, your background. I know you were in the corporate world before getting into our line of work. So, just fill us in a little bit on your background and tell me then how you got into aromatherapy.
Thank you. Well, Judson, thank you for having me. And this has really been awesome meeting people through the podcast world. So the world just keeps getting bigger and smaller at the same time. Um, it's the aromatherapy world. The long and short of how I got to where I am is I grew up with plants, loving plants. My great uncle, who was like a grandfather to me, had me weeding in the yard. My mom had me weeding. To this day, I love weeding, even though herbalists would say there's no such thing as a weed, right? But I loved plants, and then life happens. I was like, you have to get a job. I wanted to be a landscape architect, but my family wasn't super supportive of that. I kind of moved towards business because you get a job that way, and I had a good dozen years at least in the market research profession, so doing survey design focus groups and things like that. And I ended up working at a big bank, major global bank, doing client satisfaction work and the like. And I was not happy the whole time. My soul was miserable, even though I love the work. And I was able to quit my job, and aromatherapy found me. I've lived in New York City since 1999, and I in 2012 the oils found me. I forgot what it was, but I think it was eucalyptus found me, and I put it in my humidifier. And I was like, I need to learn about these things. I need to know more. So I found a workshop. Fast forward, self study. I became obsessed. I must become certified. Lo and behold, down the street from me, like 10 minutes away, was the New York Institute of Aromatherapy, offering certification through the National Association for Holistic Aromatherapy. It's a big organization to not regulate, to give us standards. But
Hmm.
I just fell into this. The plants found me. I needed them through essential oils, and I fell into this profession. I fell into teaching certification classes. So that's the
Yeah.
long version.
Well, I think it's very true. The plants do become an obsession. They really, my background's also in economics. And
Yeah.
I didn't go into the finance side of things. I'm more of a macro type guy. But after 10 years of working in politics and journalism and economics, I had to get back to the plants. I did my herbal apprenticeship. I started at age 15. And when I got back to the plants and permaculture and all that associated stuff, it's endlessly fascinating. It really is endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. I'm laughing like I know like ego can get in the way, but I know through teaching I realized I am the vessel, and it's my like I could help the plants find other people, And
Hmm.
I'm not, I could learn stuff, but like the plants always have stuff to teach us, and I will always be a student of this, always until I die.
Absolutely. Do you adhere to the doctor's signatures, or are you more of a clinical type person?
I That's a great question because I like to go to like plant communication and sitting with the plant, drinking it. I did study with Jim McDonald up in Michigan
Right.
and learning attunement. And I think that's vital, but it's great if you can find a clinical study or some evidence from a clinic to help support data. I
Yeah.
think both are good, but
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's I prefer the first. So I prefer to like look at the plant, eat it myself, drink tea,
Hmm.
etc.
Yeah, I think the personal experience was essential. But yeah, I agree. The personal experience, really getting to know the plants. For me, it's I always want to use what's in my backyard first. If I have to order something exotic, I will. But there's so many plants that we just take for granted. Like the trees, I find especially for me, are such potent herbal medicine, and they're everywhere. Everyone can find a tree. You can go to your park, you can go to a city sidewalk, and there'll be, ornamental trees planted, and people just walk by them and they take them for granted. But I mean, so many of these trees, like ornamental dogwoods and such, I mean, good substitute for Peruvian bark, good substitute for quinine, and you know,
Mm,
walnut with all its antimicrobial and antiparasitic properties and such as that. But like I said, aromatherapy is not really something I have studied very much. Tell me how the plants, the aromas work, I guess, physiologically with the olfactory system.
yeah, so I just have to share this with you and your fabulous audience that I've learned that we're in this space right now, especially in North America, including Canada, where people don't really know what aromatherapy is or not quite clear that we only work with essential oils. And I think a lot of the general public doesn't know what an essential oil is. So like I find like that's where this I have this platform like meeting great people like you and being on podcasts to start like hopefully raising general awareness. So aromatherapy, we work basically exclusively within the aromatic plants, and we work with the distilled extracts of their essential oils. So, and I'd love to go on a tangent with you a bit later to talk about some native aromatics I'm
Sure.
learning, and that's where my heart is. But we work with the essential oils, and we work through them through olfaction, dermal application, respiratory enhancement, and then there's a very questionable internal use, which I don't advocate. I
Good. Good.
advocate using turning to herbalism for
Hmm.
internal use. But when we look at aromatherapy and we're working with these volatile essential oils, we could get into the chemistry of that, but
Hmm.
we obtain them through steam distillation. And then when we work with them, they touch the mind and body at the same time because they have this affinity for working on our nervous systems. So when we're smelling an oil or working with olfactory aromatherapy, like right here, I have a blend I made yesterday of two types of frankincense, one opopanax, so these are the exotics, as you'd say,
Hmm.
and then black pepper. I decided to round this out. When I inhale that, I can have memory association, which, that's
Sure.
powerful.
Sure.
I have scent recognition, which of course is useful, but I'm also getting those chemicals into my bloodstream. And there's more and more data out there for the data lovers that show that these components, the chemical components, are working with our dopamine receptors, our GABA receptors. And I came across this cool tidbit of research. There's a doctor up in the Northeast. She's looking at frankincense, how frankincense works on the TRVP3, I think it is, pathway in
Hmm.
in the body, in the nervous system.
Hmm.
Uh, so I just gave you a lot of information there, but there's this level, these many layers that happen when you're just, quote, just smelling an oil.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and frankincense really is one of my favorite of the aromatic resins. Historically, it has had such use, going back to the ancient Greek herbalists and their writings about it. And, really, we think of aromatherapy as, well, it's somewhat trendy right now, and it's really, people are getting into it. But
Mhm.
again, speaking of like the ancient Greek herbalists, they were very aware of the effects of bay laurel, the they would, wear on their head, or like rosemary for enhancing memory, and even, of course, mugwort, burning
Yeah.
mugwort as an incense to help with dreams, and getting one over certain traumas and griefs and such. It's it's something herbalists have known, even in many cultures. I mean, the Native American smudging with the sages and such, or well, that's also in Artemisia, I guess, white sage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a fascinating subject. But and you distill your own essential oils.
No, no, I just don't have the plant material. So it takes so much plant material to obtain the essential oil. Like one of the figures I like to share is about 250 to 300 pounds of flowering lavender tops to get or obtain a pound of oil.
Wow, that's a
So
lot.
it's a lot, and many herbalists I know think that's really wasteful, and I do agree. But that's why we know as aromatherapists, those that are responsible and respect the earth, um, we know that using one drop of essential oil can be incredibly powerful.
Oh yes, they're very strong. I often
Yeah.
warn people against using them straight, like straight eucalyptus oil in the skin will burn you.
Ugh.
Or
Yeah.
when many writers talk about using the essential oils internally, and there is, obviously a place and a time for that, but so often that can be quite dangerous as well, because
Yeah.
it's not the natural form of the plant. It's
Correct.
very strong. It's very intense. How do you advise people on such as that?
Yeah. And I was just having a similar conversation yesterday. The internal use of essential oils may be called for, and in Europe, it's more common with the medical profession,
Hmm.
but here it's not regulated, et cetera, et cetera. So let's say an herbalist was working with someone and chose to turn to the essential oils and incorporate them in like a pessary or a suppository for, some kind of infection
Hmm.
or respiratory infection. The that practitioner would know how to measure out and dose these suppositories they make and give them to the individual for, 5 days, 7 days. And again, that's interesting, right? But what I tell the average person is that just don't even look to these internally. Look to the herbalist perspective. Find a local herbalist through the American Herbalist Guild, and then maybe work with tinctures and teas and
Hmm.
decoctions. Because, like you said before, the whole plant. When I work with essential oils, I am getting very specific chemistry, and I'm losing a bunch that's left behind in the still. So the essential oils shine with that memory, emotions, and working with the neuroendocrine system, and
Hmm.
especially like changing mood. And they are antibacterial and stuff like that. But internal use, please go the herbalist route.
Yeah, unless you really, really know what you're doing. That's what I always say.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and there's so much like tea tree oil in the market and such, and people get used to just using it as just a an over-the-counter remedy for nail fungus or something. But even rose oil is quite potent. And it really, there's a huge difference between just the scent of roses or the scent of that essential oil. It's much brighter. I guess I would say it's just from a scent perspective.
Yeah, you just broke up a little bit there, so
Oh, okay.
one thing that you bring up a good point that I found I had some students when I was teaching level one and level two certification, but mostly it was level one where people were learning, um, meaning level two, you already understood this stuff. When people, when you're smelling like the rose or the rosemary plant, you're getting that like the plant produces like only so much essential oil, only tiny bits. So like, let's just make this up. Like I'm rosemary, it's hot out, I'm cranking out like oils at like 0.05% of my overall composition,
Hmm.
right? And that's when we distill all that rosemary, we're getting 100% oil. So we're
Hmm.
just getting these incredibly concentrated, volatile things that are incredibly potent and powerful. And then when you start to dilute it down, it becomes closer to what it smells like in nature.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
but like CO2 extractions, we're starting to work with a lot, and that's become really popular because of CBD and all
Hmm.
that good stuff happening now. People want like think the CO2 is better than the essential oil. It's like, well, no, they each have their place because the CO2 is taking more of the colors and the waxes and other stuff. So
Hmm.
you're diluting the volatile oil component. So
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah.
it's really interesting.
Yeah, and if the plant was that strong in nature, it couldn't be pollinated. I mean, the insects that are necessary to pollinate, whether it's rosemary or even just your sweet smelling flower, like I'm sitting here right beside a whole stand of gardenias. And
Uh,
a month ago, it would have been so strongly sweet of gardenia that, I mean, it would almost be cloying, to sit here and take a sip of my tea while I'm doing this show. But if those sweet smells are necessary to attract the bees and the flies and all the things that will pollinate that plant. If it was just that strong essential oil, it would actually kill the insects. I think,
yeah,
people need to keep that in mind when they're thinking about the differences between the plants.
yeah. And you just got me excited because I am a gardener. So I spend time between Long Island, New York, and New York City. And one thing I do, and I have these wonderful plants, and often I won't cut them back for medicine or harvest them because I see the flies pollinating Angelica. And
Hmm.
who's my favorite that got damaged this year? Darn it. It used to be called Bugbane, snake. Oh, darn it. There's just someone that blooms here in this region um, that the flies love it, the bees love it, and I'll just have to send you a note.
Sure,
It's killing
sure.
me that I can't.
Well, that's two different worlds between.
Cimicifuga racemosa.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. But I mean, you really live in two different worlds from Long Island to the city. That's, I
Yeah,
mean, from yeah, you said Long Island, didn't you?
yeah, I
That's
did.
wonderful farms out there, and I mean, in the more rural areas, that's a beautiful part of the state.
Yeah, it's. I think when people see the North Fork of Long Island, where that's a wine region,
Hmm.
people think of the standard Long Island of just the Long Island Expressway and strip malls, and then they get out to where we have our place, and they're like, "What?"
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend that had I think it was a big onion farm or potato farm somewhere on the island. It was going back a few generations in her family, and I was very impressed. I mean, I kept saying, why? Why do you want an apartment in the city when you have this beauty all around you? But I assume it's very convenient for your work to also have that metropolitan experience.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, my husband is a lawyer,
Oh,
so his practice is here, and then we coexist. He's like, "You do your thing." I'm like, "Great." But yeah, it's if I didn't have access to nature, I would be miserable,
truly,
honestly.
truly, yes, absolutely. So,
If
okay, tell me about all the projects you're involved in. You members of so many associations, and you've got your podcast, and you're doing your teaching. Just give me a rundown of everything. Like, if someone's listening to the show, um, everything you have to offer that they could potentially take advantage of.
Oh, thank you. And I do want to give a shout out before we wrap up about sweet fern, which like I'm
Oh,
so
yeah.
excited about that plant. But yes, so I have the Essential Aromatica podcast, and I started that kind of just because why not? But also I realize I want to make aromatherapy accessible to people.
Hmm.
So if someone finds me, and in that I weave in my every Thursday for over 10 years I volunteered at a local soup kitchen. So I like weave in like what I made in the soup and like what maybe
Hmm.
an oil I'm talking about and how can you connect with nature, not even through the essential oils, but the aromatic plants. Um, if you go to my website, I have many free offerings. When I used to teach at the now dissolved New York Institute of Aromatic Studies, excuse me, I'm confusing, New York Institute of Aromatherapy and then the New York Institute of Aromatic Studies. I used to write class material. I wrote like plant, not monographs, but profiles.
Hmm.
So some of those I'm putting up on my website and I make plant talk videos. So if you want to get to geek out about like bay laurel, like you mentioned, or
Yeah.
helichrysum, centolina, rosemary, clary sage, I have videos and slowly I'm putting my articles up for free. Like it's there. I'm excited about this stuff. I love it, and slowly I'm putting up online class content about aromatherapy and like making your own stuff. A lot of it's free, a lot of it's pay what you wish. Like
Hmm.
I have a free how to diffuse essential oils class, which I think is a very important topic because people don't have guidelines on how
Sure.
to diffuse properly. And I guess this is a shout out for just aromatherapy awareness. Is like I am the it's a volunteer position, but it's important. I'm the New York State representative of the Alliance of International Aromatherapists. So that's a place that an organization that sets standards for education, ethical guidelines. You know, it's kind of like the Herbalist Guild, if you
Hmm.
want to think of it in that sense. There's also the National Association for Holistic Aromatherapy. It's a sister organization. So another place to turn to for finding an aromatherapist, because I really advocate if your listeners are like, ooh, this is interesting, find someone local. You
Yeah.
know, I would be flattered if you reached out to me, but I only do in person consultations. So find someone near you, you know, that you could work with that if you're interested. So those are two resources to find an aromatherapist.
Yeah. Great. And of course, you mentioned sweet fern, and that is such a neat plant. What people may not know is it's not a fern.
Yep.
It was actually a very popular tea plant in early America and has some wonderful medicinal values. Tell me about it as a aromatherapist. How do you use it?
So I ask it to grow on my property. I see it growing native um, in the Long Island Pine Barrens, and that's the region out east on Long Island. And I've purchased the essential oil. I've been slowly working with it, but I distill for the hydrosol. And I have been looking more of its nervous system aspects and how it makes
Hmm.
you feel in that way. And when I have smelled the essential oil, it has like beta caryophyllene in it and a couple other, I have to look at the chemistry. It's a bit stupefying. It would be great for pain management.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the essential oil, but it really makes me a little sleepy when I do it via inhalation. When I
Hmm.
sip the hydrosol, like do a hydrosol tasting, like a half a cup of water with one or two sprays of the sweet fern hydrosol, I have different chemistry in that. Oh my God. It literally clears your brain. So if you're
Hmm.
feeling a little foggy and a little like zombie, and you take a sip of this diluted hydrosol, within 30 seconds, it like clears over your eyebrows and like I feel like I can see brighter, things are clearer. And it's
Wow.
just it's crazy. So I don't work with it topically yet.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's a plant I'm very interested in. I'm actually working on a book on ferns right now. So in my research, sweet fern keeps popping up, and I'm wondering if I ought to put like a little, put it in the appendix. Not really a fern, but here's some traditional uses for it. What a neat plant that is.
Oh, please do put it in your book.
All
Oh,
right,
I
I
mean,
will.
I love this plant so much.
Oh yeah, I've been looking through all kinds of Native American uses for it, and the old eclectics and Thomsonians and all that. And yeah, that's well, with the supply chain issues and everything going on right now, coffee is just going through the roof. So I think, and tea will probably follow suit as we use so much imported tea. I think our native old tea substitutes may come back in vogue, whether it's Yopon holly or New Jersey tea.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all really and around here sassafras. Now, if we could just get the government to quit regulating our use of sassafras as much as they do, you
Hmm.
know, I always tell people if you're prone to cancer, if it runs in your family, be very careful about anything that may be labeled potentially carcinogenic, which sassafras is. But in the mountains where I grew up, it's just a regularly consumed tea and a spring tonic. Of course, we also eat poke greens and all kinds of things that the government doesn't recommend.
And everyone's doing okay,
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Old cough
right?
remedy
You know,
around
like,
here. The old timers would take moonshine whiskey and put honey, sassafras, and black cherry bark and angelica. That was the traditional cough syrup that everyone would keep on hand.
ooh. And Angelica is someone I've distilled, and I ask to live in my garden every year.
Oh, it's a great plant. It grows wild all
Yes,
around me. It was the first plant I learned to identify actually when I was younger because when it's very small it could look a little like poison hemlock.
it's in hemlock. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like the first thing they said, okay, forget about the ginseng and the golden seal and all that. You have to learn to identify angelica. And the candied roots. Have you ever tried the candied roots?
No, I haven't, but I've heard of them.
Oh, so good. If you like licorice. If you don't like licorice or anise, then you wouldn't like it, but I'm a licorice
Hmm.
fanatic. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Uh, no, well, other than thank you very much, and I would love to chat again about plants, but I love and I hope everyone continues to embrace our native friends, including the native aromatics.
Hmm.
That I feel like that's one of my callings is to give more awareness to these guys. Not everyone needs to turn to tea tree or eucalyptus when we have things like goldenrod and sweet
Oh yeah,
fern and
yeah.
Juniperus virginiana,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I use that all the time.
Junarda.
Hmm.
Yeah. But thank you. This is really nice and really, really awesome getting to spend time
Yeah,
with
this
you.
was fun. We'll do this again sometime. Let's keep in touch. And whenever you have something new you'd like to tell folks about, or if you just want to chat about plants anytime, just let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.